I came back from a routine doctor's appointment and my house key wouldn't turn in the lock. After 71 years on this earth, I was standing on my own front porch like a stranger, watching my son Kevin wave at me through my living room window with a smile that could have frozen hell over. 3 hours later, when the police showed up with my property deed and mortgage documents, that smile disappeared faster than his chances of ever seeing a penny of inheritance. If you've ever trusted family members who saw your kindness as weakness and your age as opportunity, grab your coffee and settle in, because this story's got more twists than a country back road. I'm Walter Morrison, and at 71 years old, I learned that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. You see, I'd been living alone in my house on Maple Drive for 3 years since my Martha passed, getting by just fine with my routines and my independence. Sure, I'd slowed down a little, needed reading glasses for the fine print, but my mind was sharp as ever, and my body was holding up better than most men my age. The only thing I needed help with was reaching the high shelves, and I had a stepladder for that. But apparently, Kevin and his wife, Ashley, had been telling a different story to anyone who'd listen. According to them, poor old Dad was getting confused, forgetting things, maybe showing early signs of dementia. They were so concerned about me living alone, so worried about my safety, so ready to step in and help manage my affairs out of the goodness of their hearts. What they didn't mention was that they'd been struggling financially for months. Kevin's sales job wasn't bringing in enough to cover their mortgage on the oversized McMansion they couldn't afford, and Ashley's real estate business had dried up when the market shifted. They were drowning in debt and looking at my paid-off house like a life preserver they could grab onto. If you enjoy stories about entitled family members who mistake love for stupidity and age for vulnerability, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. I've got 7 decades of experience dealing with people who think they can take advantage of the elderly. And trust me, the lessons I learned are worth sharing with anyone who's tired of being underestimated. That Tuesday afternoon, when I came home from Dr. Henderson's office, would be the day Kevin and Ashley learned that Walter Morrison wasn't some confused old man they could manipulate and control. By the time the sun set on Maple Drive, they'd discover that trying to steal from your own father has consequences that echo a lot longer than they ever imagined. Kevin had been my pride and joy for 46 years, the son I'd worked double shifts to put through college, the boy I'd coached through Little League and taught how to drive in the empty parking lot behind the grocery store. After his mother died, he became my closest connection to the family we'd built together, the keeper of memories and traditions that made the house feel less empty. When he married Ashley 8 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms and an open wallet. Their wedding cost me nearly $15,000, but seeing Kevin happy was worth every penny. I helped them with the down payment on their first house, co-signed their car loans, and never asked for anything in return, except the occasional visit and phone call to let me know they were doing well. But over the past year, something had shifted in our relationship. The visits became more frequent but somehow less warm, filled with probing questions about my health, my finances, my plans for the future. Ashley would walk through my house making comments about how much work it needed, how dangerous it was for an elderly person to live alone in such a big space. "Dad, you really should think about downsizing," Kevin would say during Sunday dinners. "This place is getting to be too much for you to handle. What if you fell and nobody found you for days?" The concern in his voice sounded genuine, but there was something else underneath it, something that made me uncomfortable in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. The questions got more specific as the months went by. Did I have a will? Who was handling my finances? Had I considered giving someone power of attorney just in case something happened and I couldn't make decisions for myself? They framed it all as loving concern, children looking out for their aging father's best interests. What I didn't know was that Kevin and Ashley were facing foreclosure on their own house. The mortgage payments they could barely afford had become impossible, when Kevin's sales commissions dropped and Ashley's real estate deals started falling through. They were 3 months behind on payments and running out of options to save their financial future. Looking back now, I can see how they'd been positioning themselves as my caretakers, building a narrative about my declining health and mental capacity that would justify taking control of my life and my assets. Every conversation was a test. Every visit was an evaluation. Every interaction was them gathering evidence that I was no longer competent to live independently. They thought 71 years old meant helpless. They thought widowed meant vulnerable. They thought loving father meant easy target. They were about to learn just how wrong they were about Walter Morrison and what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The first real warning sign came 6 weeks before the lockout, when Kevin suggested I should have my annual physical exam moved up. "Dad, you've been seeming a little confused lately," he said with that concerned expression he'd been perfecting. "Maybe Dr. Henderson should take a look, make sure everything's okay upstairs." He tapped his temple like I might not understand what he meant, confused. I hadn't been confused about anything, except why my son was suddenly so interested in my medical appointments, but I agreed to see Dr. Henderson earlier than scheduled, partly because I wanted to prove there was nothing wrong with my mind, and partly because Kevin's constant suggestions were starting to make me doubt myself. The doctor's visit went exactly as I expected. Blood pressure good, cholesterol manageable, reflexes normal for a man my age. Dr. Henderson even commented that I was in better shape than most of his patients 20 years younger. "Whatever you're doing, Walter, keep it up. Your mind is sharp and your body's holding up remarkably well." When I shared the good news with Kevin and Ashley, their reactions were strange. Instead of relief and celebration, they exchanged glances that lasted a beat too long. "That's great, Dad," Kevin said, but his voice lacked the enthusiasm I'd expected. "But you know, sometimes these things can be subtle. Maybe we should get a second opinion, just to be safe. A second opinion on a clean bill of health." That's when I started paying closer attention to their visits, their questions, their carefully worded concerns about my safety and independence. They weren't worried about my health. They were frustrated that my health was too good to justify the intervention they were planning. The breaking point came when I caught Ashley taking photos of my kitchen and living room with her phone. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled that bright, fake smile and said, "Oh, I'm just documenting some of the maintenance issues for your own records, you know, in case you need to make insurance claims or anything." Maintenance issues in a house I'd been maintaining perfectly well for 37 years. Issues that existed only in Ashley's imagination and whatever narrative she was building about my declining ability to care for myself and my property. That night, I started keeping track of everything they said and did during their visits. The leading questions about my memory, the subtle suggestions that I was forgetting things, the way they'd finish my sentences or speak for me when other people were around. They were building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for something I couldn't quite see yet. But the clearest warning came from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who mentioned in passing that Kevin and Ashley had been asking her questions about my daily routines. "They seem so concerned about you, Walter," she said. "They asked if I'd noticed you acting strangely, forgetting to bring in your mail, that sort of thing." Asking the neighbors about my behavior, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state, creating a paper trail of concerns that could be used to justify taking control of my life. They were orchestrating a slow-motion coup, and I was just beginning to understand the scope of their betrayal. The trap was sprung on a Tuesday morning when Kevin called to remind me about my follow-up appointment with Dr. Henderson. "Dad, you remember you have that appointment today, right? The one we scheduled to check on your memory issues?" Memory issues I didn't have, but I let it slide because I was curious to see where this was leading. "Ashley and I can't drive you today," Kevin continued, "but we'll stop by later to check on you and hear what the doctor said. Make sure you get home safe." The concern in his voice would have been touching if I hadn't started recognizing it as performance art, designed to make me feel helpless and dependent. The appointment itself was routine. Dr. Henderson ran the same cognitive tests he'd been using for years, pronounced my mental faculties excellent, and sent me home with instructions to keep doing whatever I was doing to stay so healthy. "Your son seems very worried about you, Walter," he mentioned as I was leaving. "But frankly, I wish all my patients were in as good shape as you are." I drove myself home like I'd been doing for 53 years, parked in my driveway, and walked up to my front door with my keys in hand. That's when my world turned upside down. The key that had opened my front door for decades suddenly wouldn't turn, wouldn't even slide all the way into the lock. At first, I thought maybe the lock was sticking, needed some oil or jiggling to work properly. But as I stood there fumbling with my keys, I saw movement in my living room window. Kevin was inside my house, watching me struggle with the lock. And when our eyes met through the glass, he didn't look surprised or concerned. He looked like someone who'd been caught in the middle of executing a plan. Ashley appeared beside him, and they both came to the door, but didn't open it. Instead, Kevin spoke to me through the glass. "Dad, we need to talk. We've been really worried about you, and we think it's time to make some changes for your safety." For my safety, standing on my own front porch, locked out of my own house by my own son, listening to him explain how this was all for my own good. They'd changed the locks while I was at the doctor's office, moved some of their belongings into my house, and were prepared to tell anyone who asked that they were taking care of their confused, elderly father, who couldn't be trusted to live alone anymore. "Kevin, this is my house," I said as calmly as I could manage. "I own this property, I pay the taxes, and I have every legal right to be inside. Open this door right now." "Dad, you're getting confused again," Ashley chimed in. "We talked about this. You agreed that you needed help, remember? We're just here to take care of you and make sure you're safe." Confused. Agreed. Talked about this. None of those things were true, but they were saying them loud enough for Mrs. Patterson to hear from her garden next door. They were creating witnesses to my alleged mental decline, building their case in real time while I stood helpless on my own property. That's when I realized the full scope of what they'd planned. This wasn't just about changing locks, it was about changing my entire life without my consent, taking control of my finances and property, and having me declared incompetent to manage my own affairs. They thought one afternoon was all they'd need to complete their takeover. Standing on that porch, locked out of my own home, I had a choice to make. I could bang on the door, cause a scene, give them more evidence that I was unstable and couldn't handle stress appropriately. Or I could step back, think like the engineer I'd been for 40 years, and approach this problem systematically. I chose the systematic approach. First, I walked to Mrs. Patterson's house and asked to use her phone to call the police. "Kevin and Ashley have changed the locks on my house without permission," I explained calmly. "I need an officer to help me regain access to my own property." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "But Walter, they told me you'd asked them to help you with some repairs and security upgrades. They said you'd been having trouble with your memory and needed their assistance." Having trouble with my memory. The narrative was already spreading through the neighborhood, poisoning the well of community support I'd built over decades of being a good neighbor and reliable friend. But I kept my voice steady and my explanation simple. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm in perfect health, and I never gave anyone permission to change my locks. I need to call the police to sort this out legally." She let me use her phone, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. Kevin and Ashley had done their groundwork well. While I waited for the police to arrive, I walked to my car and retrieved the folder I kept in the glove compartment with copies of important documents. Property deed with my name as sole owner. Homeowner's insurance policy listing me as the policyholder. Recent mortgage statements showing the house was paid off and belonged to Walter Morrison, not his son. I also called my bank and asked them to fax a copy of my account statements to the police station, showing regular transactions and no signs of financial confusion or mismanagement. Then I called Dr. Henderson's office and asked them to fax a copy of that day's examination results, confirming my mental competency and excellent cognitive function. By the time Officer Martinez arrived, I had everything organized and ready to present. Kevin and Ashley came out of the house looking concerned and helpful, ready to explain to the nice police officer how they were just trying to take care of poor, confused Dad, who was having one of his episodes. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Kevin started. "Our father is having some confusion issues, and he's gotten upset about some home repairs we're doing for him. He asked us to help with security improvements, but now he doesn't remember. Having episodes, confusion issues, they had their story down pat, delivered with just the right mix of concern and embarrassment. If I'd been anyone else, if I hadn't prepared my evidence, if I'd reacted emotionally instead of strategically, their performance might have worked. But I'd spent my career solving complex problems under pressure, and this was just another equation that needed the right variables to balance out. I handed Officer Martinez my folder of documents while Kevin and Ashley exchanged worried glances, suddenly realizing their father might not be as helpless as they'd assumed. Officer Martinez reviewed my documents with the thoroughness of someone who dealt with elder abuse cases before: property deed, insurance policies, bank statements, medical records. Everything painted a clear picture of a competent homeowner who'd been illegally locked out of his own property by his own family members. "Mr. Morrison, these documents clearly establish you as the legal owner of this property," he said, his voice taking on the official tone that meant business was about to be conducted. "Kevin Morrison, did you have written permission from your father to change these locks?" Kevin's face went white as he realized how much trouble he was in. "Officer, this is just a family matter. We're trying to help our father, and there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, pulling out one more document I'd been saving for the right moment. "Officer, I think you should also know that I co-signed their mortgage 3 years ago when they couldn't qualify for the loan on their own. According to the terms of that agreement, if they attempt to defraud or financially abuse me in any way, I have the right to demand immediate full repayment of their debt." The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley grabbed Kevin's arm, her face going ashen as she realized what I'd just revealed. They owed $340,000 on their mortgage, and I had just activated the clause that made the entire balance due immediately. "Dad, you can't be serious," Kevin whispered. "We're family. We can work this out." "Family doesn't lock family out of their own homes," I replied. "Family doesn't lie about dementia to steal property. Family doesn't betray 46 years of love and trust for financial gain." Officer Martinez had heard enough. "Kevin Morrison, Ashley Morrison, you are trespassing on private property. You have 10 minutes to collect your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you refuse to leave voluntarily, you will be arrested for criminal trespass and attempted fraud." But I wasn't finished yet. While they scrambled to gather their things, I made 2 more phone calls. The first was to their mortgage company, formally demanding immediate repayment of the loan I'd co-signed and notifying them of the attempted fraud. The second was to the State Real Estate Commission, reporting Ashley's unethical conduct and requesting an investigation into her license. By the time Kevin and Ashley stumbled out of my house with their hastily packed bags, their entire world was collapsing around them. Not only had they failed to steal my home, they'd lost their own home, Ashley's career, and any chance of inheriting anything when I actually did pass away. "Dad, please." Kevin tried one last time. "We're sorry. We made a mistake. Don't destroy our lives over this." But I'd already made my decision. "Kevin, you treated me like I was already dead, just an obstacle between you and my money. Well, congratulations, you are now dead to me. Don't ever contact me again, don't come to this house, and don't expect a penny when I'm gone." That was 8 months ago, and it turned out to be the most liberating day of my life since Martha's funeral. Kevin and Ashley lost their house to foreclosure within 6 weeks, exactly as I'd planned. Ashley's real estate license was suspended pending investigation, and she's now working as a cashier at a grocery store. Kevin had to move back in with Ashley's parents, a 60-year-old man sleeping in a twin bed in his mother-in-law's sewing room. Meanwhile, I've never been happier or more secure. I changed the locks again, installed a security system, and made sure every neighbor on Maple Drive knows the real story about what happened that day. Mrs. Patterson apologized for doubting me and now keeps an extra eye on my house when I'm out, just in case Kevin gets any ideas about a second attempt. The house is now legally protected by a trust that prevents any family member from challenging my decisions or claiming incompetency to overturn my wishes. I've rewritten my will to leave everything to charities that help elderly people avoid financial abuse, with a special notation explaining exactly why my son won't be inheriting anything. Most satisfying of all, I've heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Kevin and Ashley are facing a criminal investigation for elder abuse and attempted fraud. Turns out, when you try to steal from your own father, prosecutors take that kind of thing very seriously, especially when you're stupid enough to do it with witnesses and leave a paper trail. I spend my days exactly as I choose now, without anyone questioning my decisions or suggesting I'm too old to manage my own life. I've joined a senior hiking group, taken up photography, and even started dating a lovely widow I met at the community center. At 71, I'm living proof that age is just a number when you refuse to let other people write your story. The irony isn't lost on me that Kevin's greed cost him everything he was trying to steal. He wanted my house, so I made sure he lost his own. He wanted control of my finances, so I destroyed his financial future. He wanted to declare me incompetent, so I proved his incompetence to everyone who matters. Have you ever had family members who saw your age as weakness and your trust as opportunity? Have you ever discovered that the people who claimed to love you were actually planning to rob you? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes we all need to know that standing up to family bullies is not only possible, it's necessary. And if this story inspired you to protect yourself against financial predators, even when they share your DNA, hit that subscribe button. I've got 71 years of experience dealing with people who mistake kindness for stupidity. And trust me, the lessons I've learned are worth sharing. Remember, folks, family is supposed to lift you up, not lock you out. When they show you who they really are, believe them the first time.